Star Wars has been in a state of disaster ever since Disney bought Lucasfilm, and there's been a lot of rumor and speculation surrounding Star Wars video games. A lot of them are in a very bad place developmentally, but now we're actually finding out that the KOTOR remake developer Saber Interactive are being sold by Embracer, and they will become privately owned in a deal worth $500 million. I have a few things to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. Now, obviously, I love Knights of the Old Republic. KOTOR is one of my favorite video games of all time, and while I could get very hyped for this, I have not been so far because unfortunately, there have been so many remakes and remasters releasing over the past few years. I'm personally sick and tired of them, and when it comes to Star Wars, the franchise in totality has not been in a very good place, but there's also been some worrying news surrounding the KOTOR remake in general, like the fact that they had a slew of SJWs working on this project, most notably Sam Maggs, who of course became infamous because she said she was raped in Grand Theft Auto 5, which of course is absurd, but we haven't really heard a lot of positive news surrounding the Knights of the Old Republic remake. It has been in development hell over the past few years, but this actually is slightly good news, or it could lead to something positive because Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake, after months of hearing that it was no longer in active development, we now know that it is, and that there is a major shakeup going on because despite rumors that the project had been canceled altogether, it seems that Saber Interactive is still working on the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake. After being announced to lots of excitement from fans at the PlayStation's showcase in 2021, things quickly started to look a bit turbulent, with Aspyr leaving the project and Saber Interactive taking over. Sony even ended up delisting the game's announcement trailer just a few months ago, which led to some insiders claiming that the game was likely never going to end up releasing. I have to talk a lot about insiders on this channel. I personally do not believe a lot of insider information when it comes to the gaming industry, because these insiders who claim to have loads of information typically end up being wrong. But we actually now know that Saber Interactive, the developer of KOTOR remake, will actually leave Embracer in a $500 million deal to become a privately owned company, the biggest move yet in Embracer's ongoing cost-cutting initiative. Now, of course, when it comes to, Embracer, they have sucked up so many development companies over the past couple of years, and they have definitely extended themselves way more than they probably initially anticipated. They probably expected to be able to, rake in money with all of the purchases they've made, but unfortunately for them, that's just not the way things worked out. They have greenlit a lot of projects, and of course the companies that they now own have greenlit lots of projects, lots of announcements like this Knights of the Old Republic remake that have not yet gone anywhere. And then of course they were supposed to go through with this mega deal that ended up falling through only about a year ago. We were never painted a full picture as to what their plans were, but their stock has been dropping significantly over the past year after their $2 billion mystery deal had self-destructed, so it really seemed like they were banking on those few $1 billion to kind of get them through a lot of the projects that they had greenlit and ultimately a lot of the purchases that they've made over the past few years, and because that fell through, it seemed like they were desperate to cut costs any possible way they could. And now that's leading to something like this happening, with Saber Interactive actually, becoming a privately owned company. And over the past year, there has been a lot of turbulation with Embracer. I mean, most notably, I talked on this channel about the Saints Row reboot and Volition. They ended up closing a 30-year-old development studio because the Saints Row reboot ended up losing them a boatload of money. I mean, it cost over $100 million to make, never mind with marketing. The estimates is that it ended up ballooning to 150 million development costs, and then they ended up shutting Volition down. And there's also been a lot of speculation surrounding what their plans are for Borderlands. I mean, the rumor, at least at this point in time, is that Gearbox is actually looking for a similar deal where they will become a privately owned company and they will no longer be under the Embracer umbrella. And there's not a lot of information out there on that. It is just, inside sources who are familiar with the situation, allegedly. But that would also be a major blow for Embracer in the long run, because of course they spent $1.3 billion on Gearbox and they had really big plans for them, but at the same time they could end up seeing a hefty chunk of change so that Gearbox can go and basically do whatever they want, like Saber Interactive, and it might end up being a positive for them, at least in the short term. And when it comes to Star Wars video games, especially this Knights of the Old Republic remake, look, I love Knights of the Old Republic. I would love a solid remake, but there has been some really negative news surrounding this remake, and specifically the teams that they had on this. Originally, it was Aspyr, and then Aspyr ended up handing it over to Saber Interactive, and now it looks like Saber is still planning to work on this, but the project right at this point in time has officially been restarted, and Star Wars games in general have not been in a very good state. I mean, EA just recently canceled a Star Wars shooter. Respawn, who of course does Apex Legends and did Titanfall, was supposed to be working on this, and they ended up having to cancel that. And we also don't really have a lot more information on Star Wars Outlaws. When it was announced last June, it ended up facing a lot of backlash. There was a lot of people who were a little bit disappointed with what they saw, especially that it was being marketed in yet another giant open world Star Wars game, even though we've heard several of those being greenlit, and a lot of them are, again, in development hell. So it will be interesting to see what Saber Interactive ends up doing if they end up shelving this Knights of the Old Republic remake once and for all. But I don't think that that will happen. I know that there's a lot of speculation that they'll do that. I don't think that that's going to happen, just because it is the major project that they have been working on over the past few years, and it really seems like they want to continue to barrel forward and end up getting this game done. And I do think that if a KOTOR remake and did end up coming out, it would sell like hotcakes. Even if it did have some questionable people still working on it, I do think that it still would sell really well. A lot of people would be extremely excited for it, but it also will be interesting to see what ends up happening with Embracer over the next few months to year, and if, a mega deal ended up going through so that Gearbox could become a privately owned company. It just kind of seems like a lot of these developers want to break off from Embracer at this point in time. I also do not think the optics surrounding Embracer are particularly good. Whenever I hear Embracer, I instantly think of the kind of turmoil they've caused in the gaming industry and the havoc that they have been wreaking, and it's just not a positive association for me personally, and I know a lot of people feel the same way. It's like when they hear Sweet Baby Inc., when they hear Embracer, they instantly cringe and they think, oh no, what are they up to now? What are they trying to purchase now? And what are they going to end up closing down now? Only time will tell. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few months to the next year, but it does seem like the Knights of the Old Republic remake is still in the works at Saber, and to top it off, the only reason why that appears to be the case is because they are being sold by Embracer, and they will now become a privately owned company in a deal worth $500 million. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.